And
wait, and baby, I'm TFC till I die.
not so quick on the uptake there. Sorry, boys.
Good. No worries, man. No worries. We were promised fireworks. We were promised big introductions. We kind of got it on Saturday. Welcome to this week's Toronto Till I Die podcast. You're with your host, Mike Newell, along with, as always, Jeffrey P. Nesker and Michael Singh. Boys, Saturday, I don't know. I personally didn't feel a letdown, but I think a lot of people went to that stadium thinking they were going to see Lorenzo Insigne, and then ended up seeing a lot of TJ Marcinkowski, which I don't think was a part of the original marketing plan for Toronto FC.
It's their fault, Mike. They don't listen to us. We could have told them, and it's their fault.
We tried.
Man, Mikey Singh, I did not notice until just now that he's wearing a shirt from my favorite fashion house. Yeah, my Ovo.
Yeah,
Your Ovo.
Amazing.
Well, again, guys, welcome. Welcome to the pod. Boys, the weekend was a good one for me. Like, I know it was a draw and it was disappointing, but the vibes in BMO were actually quite good.
Immaculate.
Despite no Insigne. We did get a Criscito sighting though, and he looked pretty good. We'll get into that in the show a bit later. But boys, how was your weekend? How did the weekend play out for you?
Busy.
Well, Mike, you got a comment. You know, people are ignoring Mikey Singh's Ovo gear, his Ovo drip, and commenting on your drip today, which is of course the coveted Umbro. What is it? The Centennial 100th anniversary or the 125th anniversary kit.
Got it for $25 in the beaches. Guy didn't know what he had.
Oh my!
Why does this never happen to me? Oh, actually, I'm not being fair. I did get my coveted Canada training top, TFC training top through this show. So that stuff does happen to me. You know, I'm reminded. It's funny because we keep saying roller coaster, and I'm going to regale you with a Jeff story, which is, you know, I used to be. I love roller coasters, but I used to be deathly afraid of them. And the only reason that I'm not afraid of them anymore is that I was going to Canada's Wonderland with a friend, and I told him that I loved roller coasters, even though I was scared shitless of them. And of course, you know, the first one he wants to go on is the Bat. So it's like 2 hours in a lineup waiting to get on this thing that I'm quaking in my boots, and I can't come clean. So I do it anyway. And I ended up liking it. And now I love roller coasters. And so I'm reminded of that, you know, every time we get frustrated with this team, you know, and sort of give it that roller coaster tag that, you know, sometimes it sucks. And sometimes you're waiting in line for 2 hours, you know, quaking in your boots. And that's kind of part of the ride. You know, some people would say waiting in line and getting all, they need me on a roller coaster pod. Some people would say,
even write that in a show run better than that. That was
but
love it.
There are people that would say part of the experience of riding a coaster is waiting in that line, right? And I think that we can apply that to TFC fandom. You know, we've been waiting in a rather long line, just sort of watching all these excited faces go by, and some of them have left forever. And I think that brings us to where we want to start today.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit, a quick recap on the San Jose game this past Saturday. But before I do that, well, don't worry, Jeff can get back on that trip. He's got a lot of kits he can bring out. But I forgot to tweet out to the TFC Live community about 3 burning questions this week, so that's on me. But if you do have any burning questions that you have for us today, we are a live show, and you can comment if you're on YouTube out there. So go ahead, throw us your burning questions in the comments there, and we'll get them on at the end of the show. But quickly, a tough 2-2 draw against San Jose. Again, we talked about it on the Tunnel Club yesterday, but I mean, 2 mistakes cost you
plain and simple
3 points, right? Or at least you drop 2 points because of it. So guys, just wanted to get your thoughts on the match, what you saw in the game, and sort of what do you think this is a potential springboard to something, or is this kind of a whole bunch of nothing right now?
Yeah, I was
Mikey?
thinking that during the game, Mike, that it was a potential springboard, especially when they come back, and then it feels a little bit of deflated, just the way that they conceded that goal. I tweeted out after the game that I can't believe TSC gave up that lead, and 99% of my replies were like, "You can't," which I'm like, okay, I didn't raise my hand for that one. I set myself up for that one, but I just didn't watch it. The manner in which that game happened, you think about, okay, there's a couple chances for TFC to get the ball deep when it's counting down to injury time. They give away some carelessly in the middle of the park, pretty bad spaces to lose the ball. That's one thing. Iowa Canola had a breakaway. He could have iced the game in like the 88th, 89th minute.
Yes, he could have.
Save. So your one job at that point is to see the game out. Then, of course, you give up a breakaway, which Quentin Westberg does brilliantly to bail you out. So after that, I'm like, okay, you know what? Like, let's talk about this later. They're getting the job done. Like, we're going to be good. And then all of a sudden, another one in the span of like 20, 30 seconds.
Yep.
That part to me was deflating. Not necessarily just the result, just the manner in which they gave away those points. And hopefully those aren't points we're going to be talking about come 16 games later when TFC are hopefully battling for a playoff spot here.
Yeah, I feel those 2 points are going to come back and haunt us. It felt like that game, was it 2019? It was definitely pre-Pando, where we were all on our way out. We were playing Atlanta. We were all on our way out of the ground, and then they awarded them a penalty kick, and we all had to come back.
That was 2019,
Yeah, like it definitely, it felt like it was a done deal, but there was also purpose to that San Jose attack, right? Like, and we just looked dead on our feet. To give away that one breakaway and then another one so soon after, it speaks to something, right? Like last week we were talking about how this team has a problem with starting games and starting second halves, and they tend to concede on the regular in those 15-minute intervals. Well, this is an entirely new wrinkle. They fell apart in the last 5 minutes, like in total garbage time. And my question to you is, was it the subs, right? Because we made a lot of substitutions to get guys on the field for those last 10, 15 minutes, which isn't something we do on the regular anymore. It's not part of, Bob Bradley's regular trucking out. This seemed like he wanted to get Schaff on the field, et cetera, et cetera. And the team just lost all of its shape and fell apart and just were so privy to those San Jose attacks. So my question is, was that a terrible decision on the part of the coaching staff?
Look, I think it's two mistakes, two individual errors cost you the game, right? Like, and we're going to talk about it in the first segment in terms of are the numbers kind of saying one thing compared to our eyes. But I mean, Inafuniachi Achara has an opportunity to clear the ball, put his foot through it, and just send it away.
Yep.
And he tries to play a pass, and he gets closed down, and that leads directly to the goal. And you're just. And this is a player who hasn't played a lot this season. I think only 260 minutes, I think, this year.
I'm pretty sure he wasn't wearing his headband either, which was a mistake.
Well, maybe that doesn't give him his powers. I don't know. But
exactly.
Right? But, like, you're just thinking back to the first goal, right? It's Chris Mavinga playing a cross-field pass to Jaden Nelson with two players in his zone ready to pick the ball off, right? It's these individual sort of just errors that happen in the game that cost us. And the numbers and just the results show it. Like, other than that, TFC bossed the game. And that's got to be kind of the frustrating part of this, is that
it is. It absolutely is. And so here's my question to you boys. Because individual mistakes seem to be our kryptonite right now. But we're seeing progression with the Bob Bradley system, would you say? So it's just about, getting these, like, they're going to happen, right? But they're exacerbated because they're happening all the time. Is this like the last gasp of the team finding its shape? Sort of rewording your earlier question, just in Jeff speak.
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think point out it's the first time they've really played in a natural 4-3-3 formation,
Thank you
except
for saying it.
for like the first 2 games of the season.
Hmm.
I spoke to DeAndre Kerr after the game, and he said, "Yeah, that's a formation they played in a lot of during preseason, and that's clearly what
Okay.
Bob Bradley wants to do." And we'll get into Mark-Anthony Kaye a little bit later, but obviously he's a perfect fit for that type of system, the one that Bob Bradley wants to play there. So, yeah, I'd say we're progressing and moving in the right direction, and that's why a game like that stings so much, is because
Hmm.
there has been so much positivity that's been building up. Obviously, the debut of Criscito, there's a lot of momentum there building up, and then just a little bit of that deflation. So hopefully TFC can shake that off and kind of continue to kind of build on what this last stretch has been for them, which in my opinion is positive and moving in sort of the right direction. But it hurts. It hurts. It stings.
Yeah.
Whatever you
Well,
want to say.
yeah, and then that's the hard thing going into the segment. So let's transition a little bit into this first segment here
Sure.
about the numbers, because it's hard to. And yeah, I actually agree with that comment. I don't think a charge should
Hmm.
have been in that moment, but fair enough, the decision was made. But I it's hard when you look at the numbers and you're saying like this team is improving and possession has gone up. The amount of chances they're creating is going up. The shots they're getting on goal is going up, even though people are complaining about them shooting. It's actually showing that they're actually increasing the amount of shots
Yeah. I'll
they're taking
shoot.
per
Shoot.
game, right? But they are shooting, right? Like
Mhm.
I guess the thing is that people aren't seeing the goals. They're not seeing the tangible result, because in the end of the day, the stat that matters is how many points do you have at the end of the season,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
How many
Absolutely.
points are in the bank? So I guess my first question to you guys in terms of these numbers, and I gave you a couple of games, the last sort of 3 games that we've played at home, positive attacking stats. But where are the goals?
Yeah.
Where are they? Where do we hope they're coming from? And should these start to now correlate into more goals? Therefore, in theory, what we hope are wins. Jeff, I'll start with you.
I mean, this is my problem with advanced statistics, right? Is because the answer that I need to properly even approach your question, I don't think exists, which is, what's the percentage of teams sort of making up the difference, right? And like, yeah, in an MLS context, is there even such a database that exists, right? Because it's starting to feel like it's starting to feel like a blog to article where you just you choose your headline, whatever incendiary headline you want, and you go on Twitter for 5 minutes and you find 5 tweets that match your argument, and Bob's your uncle, you're done, right? It seems that you can use advanced stats to sort of paint any argument when the real evidence is right in front of your face, right? You're not winning games, you're not scoring goals. But wait, our XG is off the charts. That seems like the page 2 sort of loser's lament, right? Like we're bottom of the standings, but if you look at our expected goals, well, we in a perfect world we should be here and here and here. So while I think there's a validity in advanced statistics, I do think it can be a hole in a case like this because, like you said so eloquently, the proof is in the pudding and it's not there. So does it embolden us to sit back and clutch at these pearls like, well, if you look at expected goals and if you look at our possession stats and etc., this and that, and the phase of the moon, we're actually doing pretty okay? Does that distract from the fact that we're not? You know what I mean? Like when do you eventually you know call a spade, I guess, is my question, right?
I disagree with you, Jeff.
And
First
I welcome it.
first 60-70% of the year, there was maybe one game all year where TFC had more expected goals than their opponent.
Can I just say that
Mhm.
prior to the 2 wins in the cup and against Atlanta, every win that TFC had, except the Chicago game, I think we had lost a possession battle by like a lot. Like we didn't have the ball
Every win,
at all.
right?
Yeah, every win basically
Yeah.
prior to the only game prior to that was the Chicago 3-2 win for the international.
Right. And yeah, on the expected goals standpoint, the only one was DC United, and we had 0.1 more expected goals than they did. And sure, expected goals isn't everything, but it does give you kind of an indication of the quality of chances that TFC were creating versus
Sure.
giving up. And you look at this recent stretch of games. I haven't looked at the Seattle game, I do believe Seattle probably had a better XG than TFC.
Yes, they
but
did.
aside from that, you think back to Atlanta United, Columbus, obviously San Jose. All of those games, TFC significantly outplayed their opponent. And that's something we haven't been able to say. Sure, there are times they got the result, um, but it wasn't always in the prettiest fashion. For me now, I'm looking at the team and maybe they're not getting the results. Maybe sometimes they are, but I think that the overall football is getting a lot better.
Hmm.
And I'll also say is that this TFC team that we're talking about today, or we're talking about last week or the week before, it's a going to be completely different looking TFC team once you slot in Insigne, once you slot in Criscito every day, once you slot in Mark-Anthony Kaye, Bernardeschi, all of those, like, it's
Mhm.
it's moving on here, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and Jeffrey, if I could just break in just really quickly. I know I talked
sure.
about this a lot in the Tunnel Club, so I'm not going to go into this into
I think you
too
might be
in
asking the
depth.
same question I'm about to ask, but go
Fair
ahead.
enough, but like here's just something that I've noticed in these sort of looking at these stats, because it's something that I look at quite a bit, and it's sort of the average positions of players on the pitch
Hmm.
when they're playing in games, and obviously it's a little different because the two games that I gave you guys in the rundown are with Alejandro Pozuelo, and obviously the San Jose game this past weekend has no Alejandro Pozuelo. And the average positions of the players in terms of how they are playing is almost night and day. They were
Wow.
very narrow, very, very narrow in the losses to Columbus and the loss to Seattle in terms of their build-up play. Whereas in the San Jose game, yes, it ends up being a draw, but there's width to the play. There's a
Hmm.
clear connection points between the center backs, Michael Bradley, Jonathan Osorio, and specifically towards Domenico Criscito, or
Hmm.
Domenico Criscito, I should say, between Mavinga, Oso, and Criscito. So you're already starting to see a more balanced a team in terms of
Hmm.
the way that they're passing amongst each other and the way that their build-up play is being done. And that actually helps you defensively as well in terms of your coverage in the midfield. And I think that's what we
So much.
saw on Saturday. So yes, of course, the results suck. They suck.
Yeah.
There's no way around that. You can't sugarcoat that in any way. They're still 12. They're on 19 points right now.
Ouch.
And right now they're 7 points out of a playoff spot. Uh, but the play should dictate that as you're starting to get a Lorenzo Insigne into the team, as you're getting a Bernardeschi into the team, right? Criscito gets comfortable. Mark-Anthony Kaye joins this lineup. This should turn into positive points in the actual point totals for TFC.
Structure,
Okay.
like
Two things.
structure.
Oh, go, please continue.
No, yeah, just building off what Mike was saying quickly, just there's structure now within the team where Pozuelo is
Hmm.
not just free roaming wherever he wants. And I mentioned this last week, but that goal against Seattle was a direct result of Pozuelo drifting inside and leaving the right wing completely exposed. You don't have that
Yep.
anymore. You don't have
Yeah.
players drifting wherever they feel like and wherever they want. You actually have, and as you said, Mike, it helps you out defensively because you know where guys are going to be, and there's not going to be an overload the other team can simply just take advantage of. So, as a young player too, that I'm sure that helps a lot as well. But yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
No, absolutely, absolutely. These are all great points. Here comes Axis of Evil once again to throw a salve on our conversation, which is, and I think this is a really good point. The possession numbers can also come from teams playing defensive against us with early goals, right? That could skew the stats because we're
Absolutely
almost we're almost never ever leading a game.
true. But
Uh,
what I will say to that, just
mhm.
really quickly to Axis, I would say that yes, that is true. But I think the difference between again the games with Alejandro Pozuelo and the games now, and even with Alejandro Pozuelo actually, is that there are going to be more opportunities now to break those teams that sit in lower blocks against us, mainly because they have to now be a little bit more cautious of the fact that Alejandro Pozuelo isn't just going to be roaming around anywhere. So therefore, you're waiting for that countered switch that Michael was talking about, right?
Yeah,
Now
yeah,
they have to
fair.
worry about Bernardeschi. They're going to have to worry about an Insigne. They're going to have to worry about more progressive passing from Mark-Anthony Kaye and from Jonathan Osorio and from Michael Bradley. So I think, although, yes, those possession stats do indicate that teams will sit back and give us the ball, I think the opportunity for us to break down those lower blocks will get better. And the stats are starting to bear that out a little bit more.
Okay.
Just so for context.
Now, Mike, my question to you two is this, and I think I already know your answer, but we've watched this squad struggle to adopt the Bob Bradley system. Now, obviously, Mark-Anthony Kaye coming in is like the dream signing because this guy comes in pre-baked. You know what I mean? Like he's been drilled in this system. Is probably where he's been the most successful in terms of his club career. Maybe at USL with he was more successful, but certainly in MLS in his career with MLS. Are we at all concerned about, obviously when you're talking about Bernardeschi, as opposed to like DeAndre Kerr, he's more veteran. He's played for, obviously he's played for different teams, different coaches in different systems. But are you not at all worried that considering that it took the kids about 6 months to learn the system and some of them failed at it, that these guys may not come in ready to go in a 4-3-3?
When you say system, what are you talking about?
Yeah, because I don't know if
I'm talking about
really played Bob Bradley's system though.
Well, I'm talking about his like very strict 4-3-3 principles. The fact that
we haven't really seen that this year. We've seen the 4-3-3
I agree.
twice.
I agree, but I'm just okay.
Right.
So we're not worried that these guys are going to come in.
Well, I don't like
and
talking
be able to
that
handle.
sort of. I like talking that
No,
sort of absolute that Bob Bradley has one system because that's just untrue.
Okay.
4-3-3 is his preferred system, but we haven't.
Okay, I'll start saying that.
He's moved his team around to accommodate a player like Pozuelo. He's changed his game to get the best out of the players that he had.
Fair.
Right. So as we move into the summer, this transfer window, as we're bringing in more players, you're going to start to see more players come in that are players that can probably excel in a 4-3-3 formation. That's definitely what's taken into account when you bring in these types of players. And like we've had, I would say this is probably the one window we've really had with Bob Bradley leading the charge. I don't think the other windows Bob Bradley was necessarily creating his vision. It was more so just getting rid of some players who didn't want to be here. So now we're starting to see this team sort of come together.
Yep, absolutely.
So here's something that, again, digging into the stats a little bit and then also just confirming with our eyes is just defensively, right? Because we're talking about the offensive stats. We're talking about attacking play, but clearly defending is still an issue with this team, right? Both from an individual perspective, but also from a team defending perspective. So, just looking at the stats, what's being lost in the messaging here, right? Between what Bob Bradley is trying to instill in the players and what's actually being executed on the pitch. Because what we're seeing is that turnover numbers are still high, right? Obviously we talked about individual errors from players, but what is being missed in the messaging here? Because it feels like we're on this podcast and doing things like the Tunnel Club and talking about this on social media. It feels like we're repeating ourselves every single week with kind of the same issue. So what is being missed in the messaging? What are you guys seeing or what are you guys thinking?
Quality of the players that are on the pitch in the first half of the season.
Really, it's just quality.
I think that's the biggest thing. Yeah,
I would agree.
I believe that Chris Mavinga hasn't lived up to what he was capable of doing. He hasn't looked like Chris Mavinga for 2 years now, and that's a huge loss when you're paying him over $1 million. I think Shane O'Neill's a great center back, fine center back. He's been doing a great job this year, but is he really an everyday starting center back? And then you're also playing us Kosi Thompson at right back, who this is the first time really he's played a right back in his career, and he's a kid that's still learning and growing, and that part's tough as well. And then as well, the central midfield hasn't really helped out TFC too much in the way that they wanted to this year. Michael Bradley, as we've talked about, has been really good this year. He's also losing a step and maybe isn't able to cover in ways that he's been able to cover in the past. Although, again, he's done a fantastic job. Ozo's been in and out of the lineup. So we've had to slot in DeAndre Kerr and Jaden Nelson, who aren't natural central midfielders in the middle of the park. Sometimes as well, Ralph Priso, who didn't get too much of a look there as well at times. So I think for me, it's a lot of it comes down to quality, and I think we saw an example of that is when you insert Domenico Criscito into the lineup on Saturday. How many clear-cut opportunities did TFC give up that game? Albeit, they're playing San Jose, but how many clear-cut opportunities did TFC actually give up on Saturday?
Right.
3.
Not a ton. Yeah.
You're right.
I mean, if you take away the Mavinga giveaway, obviously the Achara one at the end, it's the one, and that was the breakaway that Quentin Westberg saved. So I think a lot of it does come down to quality, and then you add in Criscito. You add in a Mark-Anthony Kaye, who I think is going to do so much to help out the team defensively in so many different ways. Then maybe the expectation, the bar is raised a little bit for where this team is defensively. But on paper, I just didn't think the quality was there for this team to maybe be as good defensively as they need to be.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's time to speak some hard truths. Like you said, Mavinga is a shadow of himself. I thought he played decent on Saturday, if not for the giveaway and some really, really bad decision making. It was clear as a bell. Like, you put Criscito in that lineup, and suddenly there's a lot less defensive fallacies going on. So I mean, you have to look at it at face value and agree with what Mike's saying almost wholeheartedly. Like, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, having a proper fullback, imagine that. It makes a difference.
It's funny because I know a lot of people, and even myself included, right, were concerned about Rasheed a little bit about his age, right, in terms of what do his legs have. He's coming off almost a full season in Italy, and then coming into the season, looked great, looked fine on Saturday. It looked like he slotted in pretty seamlessly onto that left-hand side. And I think just his craft, his guile, in terms of being able to know where to be on certain plays. And I think someone else made this comment on the Tunnel Club yesterday that I thought was really apt about the fact that when either Luca Petrasso or Jacob Schaffelberg were playing on that left-hand side defensively, they would end up being sort of high and out of position and being caught on the counter. Now, part of that is aforementioned Alejandro Pozuelo maybe not being able to cover and being in the right spots, but also them just not knowing when to start to track back in advance and not seeing plays in advance. And I felt like Criscito was able to do that on Saturday and really sort of take away opportunities. Again, like you've both said, it was San Jose. So let's see what happens when it's maybe a higher level opponent. But, from that perspective, I think that's a big help if he can stay fit and be able to, to solidify that part of the field. Then it only starts to look a little bit better from sort of those additions that we've already talked about.
For sure. How would you grade Criscito's debut, Mikey Singh?
He had the best first touch on the pitch on Saturday.
That's really, really well put. That's a great point. Did you see any worrying signs? I mean, is there any behind the scenes info as to why he didn't play the full 90?
I don't know, but behind the scenes, but he'll tell you that the target was 60 minutes for Criscito to play.
Yeah,
okay.
Just because he's coming off a little bit of an off season, and as you guys have alluded to, played a lot of minutes down the stretch. He actually missed a lot of time this year with a calf injury and obviously COVID.
Like midway through the season. Yeah, midway through the
beginning.
Calf injuries, it's the TFC way. Calf injuries are our speciality. Absolutely.
So then you see him go down in the 70th minute, and it's a concern that he picked up cramp and whatnot. But the quality is there. I mean, his set piece deliveries were unbelievable. They were the best set piece deliveries we've seen at a Toronto FC in years.
Because he put in that cross for DeAndre when he put it off the crossbar, right?
Yeah, every corner down the left-hand side, Criscito was taken. And typically that's one that Luca Petrasso or Pozuelo would take. And I think Criscito, in terms of set pieces, and the quality is just there. And the little flick inside he had to Chris Mavinga, which led to DeAndre Kerr's chance where he broke through and shot like that. Stuff like that. I mean, you appreciate the quality of a player like that. And I think, yeah, we get a real sense of the difference of the level between a Serie A and MLS by looking at someone like Criscito, because I think he's thinking and reading the game a lot quicker than TFC. Some of his progressive passes that he made to penetrate a defense I think that's going to do wonders right now for this team moving forward. And I can't wait to see him and Insigne link up down that left-hand side, because that's going to be a different level of quality that we haven't seen this year from TFC. So overall, if I had the greatest performance, I think there still is more to give, because I thought he got caught out once or twice defensively.
That's fair.
Stepping up a little bit too high, a little bit too aggressively. But overall, I mean, he came as advertised and maybe then some. So I would say, let's say B plus A minus for his debut.
Nice. Yeah, Chris Talks gives him an 8 out of 10, so he's right in line with your review.
Yeah, I give it a B plus. Obviously, I think it's really just a B plus simply because he's just not 100% fit yet, and not injury wise fit, just fit, right? In terms of matches played and things like that. So as he gets fitter and as he gets his legs under him, sort of for this for the rest of the season here, I think you'll see. I think you're going to just see I think you're going to see a motivated Criscito. Funny enough, I think he might have heard some of the stuff we've been talking about in terms of his age. Can he actually hack it, right? From that perspective,
sure.
The skill I don't think has been questioned. But from that perspective, I think a B plus, a solid B plus. And right now, honestly, you'll take B pluses. B pluses probably get you some more points and get you closer to a playoff line. Than
Absolutely.
anything.
Absolutely. I would give him a B plus as well. I was a little concerned about the sub, but I had a sneaking suspicion that, like Mike said, he was never expected to go the full 90. So that makes me a little bit happier. But you never like to see a left back come out before the final whistle. So as long as it wasn't an injury concern, then I'm a pig in shit here. So yeah, absolutely.
So just moving along here, just in terms of we're talking about these new additions coming in and how they're going to affect the first team going forward. But one of the things that I kind of got questions about from a 3 burning questions perspective that I didn't really bring up in previous, but it kind of amalgamated them into this segment, is really just, is the youth movement kind of done at TFC? Going forward. And I asked this question more from obviously Ralph Priso being traded out is sort of the most glaring example, but I think a lot of people have been really kind of hoping that Toronto FC would give young players a chance and bring them into the lineup. I don't think they foresaw that it would be this many all at once. But given that these moves are being made now and more senior players are starting to come in, not just for this season, but maybe even going forward in terms of how this team views itself in terms of roster build. Is the youth movement kind of, maybe not dead is the right word, but is it going to be muted going forward for TFC?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Depends what you define the youth movement as. Like, are you going to see 5, 6, 22 and under players in the 11 anymore? Probably not, unless you're in a cup match or rotating your squad. But you are going to see players get opportunities in a way that we haven't in previous years. Not necessarily at the start of this year, because I think that was an anomaly, and just based on the way the club was building, it just made sense that young players would fill that void for now. Yes. But I think in an ideal world, you have a pretty veteran, maybe squad with a couple of youngsters sprinkled in. But I don't think there's going to be many under 20 starters for Toronto FC moving forward.
Yeah, I said it last week. And I think we had made sort of a general consensus that the goal of the youth movement was it was multifaceted, right? They cleared a lot of house. These kids have been waiting in the wings to come up for a bunch of seasons. It just made sense to see what you got. And we had said that they'll probably get the season, but I think we can take that back. I think Bob's seen what he needs to see, fair or not. because life is rarely fair, and nothing exists in a vacuum. And, they could rage about, well, I could have performed better had I been trotted out with less kids on the pitch, et cetera, ad infinitum. But I think decisions have been made. The Priso deal is that in sharp relief. I think decisions have been made moving forward about who's going to make the cut. And it only makes sense. I mean, as Mike Singh will tell you, these guys come at a humongous discount in a capped league. As many homegrown contracts and academy players you can get away with, it really helps your bottom line. So we needed to find answers, and it feels like we did, for better or worse. So is it over? I mean, if you want to talk in generalities, yeah, I think it is for this crop of youth players. And now we've made decisions about where they go, what they're capable of, who they can platoon for, who they can sub for, if Bob even wants them around, are they trade bait? And I honestly do think that those decisions have been made moving forward.
Yeah, I think, for me, I hope it's not over in a sense that we're going to go back to what we had prior to, let's say, 2020, where, you may get like one young player may get, 120 minutes in a season. Like, I hope we don't go back to that. I understand the idea of, look, this is going to be Toronto FC, and Toronto FC are always going to spend big on DPs, and they're always going to be looking to bring in the best available talent out there on the squad. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't want to see a situation where we no longer trust in players from the academy to play roles on the squad, whether it be, again, starting roles off the bench, from that perspective. And look, if at the end of the day you play those players and then you determine that they're better off being an asset for you in a trade or being sold to get some money back to then move for X senior player, that's fine. Because a lot of clubs use their academy in that fashion.
Most do,
right? And if Toronto FC see themselves as, which I think they do, as a big club within MLS, then I still want them to go down to the academy and bring players up and give them minutes and showcase them. And look, if they become stars for you, awesome. If they become MLS lifers who are role players in your squad, awesome as well, right? Yeah. That's perfect. If they end up being a player that you can use to go get a center back that you desperately need, because that's what, a Real Salt Lake wants. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but sure. You know what I mean? Then yes, absolutely. That's the way of doing it. And I think that's how you could still have a youth movement and not necessarily have 6-7 kids all at once playing for TFC and still be useful for the club.
It's like what Ravi says, and I'll bring up the quote. There is a delusion that all of our academy kids are destined for European glory. And this sort of factors into my rebuttal of what you just said. We haven't figured out the calculus yet, right? Like there was the not playing kids or playing them, only in garbage games. Then there was this 6 months. Let's, just throw them out there and see what we've got because, the time is right. And we're in a lull, and this might as well be a stopgap thing. We can't. That system works as long as you're brutal and you have a properly regimented, streamlined sort of checklist. I know I say the word checklist a lot. Like, did you meet this performance incentive? Did you meet that performance incentive? No, cool. On to the next. I think the issue with TFC is that because it's so inconsistent how we play the kids, is that the book's never written about them. So there's always a dissenting opinion. Oh, well, you haven't given Jaden Nelson enough time. Oh no, if Noble Okello just figures out his feet, right? As long as we're brutal, I think that's fine. But I was watching a documentary on YouTube about Victor Vasquez and the career that he had, right? And it opened with La Masia, and it threw out stats of, the amount, like how hard it is to get into La Masia, 1, and then how hard it is to break into the Barcelona first team, 2. And like the percentages are bracing with respect to like kids that, are super competitive, get into La Masia, but then don't ever have a sniff of the first team, right? And are kind of left to their own devices. So where is this, TFC is not Uber, right? To be Uber, to be a disruptor, TFC's not in that
disruptor on this
but
podcast.
TFC's not in that position, right? Like they're not going to reinvent how academy systems work, right? So we bet like at least you're not going to break the rules until you know the rules cold. And we've been unfair to that process. We've used our academy in really strange ways, and we've never really embraced any kind of business model for it, right? So of course there's like this weird kind of miasma with how we play the kids and why we play the kids. But I take some comfort in, for better or worse, I do think that this experiment is over, at least with this crop of kids. And I do think that Bob and his staff have made decisions. They may not be popular ones, and they may not be well-liked decisions. Certainly the Wreck-It Ralph trade speaks to that. But this is what I wanted. I wanted somebody at that club to have an opinion, somebody in a position of power to have an opinion that wasn't wait and see. And now I think we're at that point.
Okay, so what did we learn then in these last 6 months with all the young players playing?
Like, a lot of them aren't good enough. A lot of them aren't good enough.
Are we sure about that?
I don't care anymore.
Sure about that?
Somebody somewhere has an opinion that has some weight, because you can never be sure of anything. Am I going to walk outside and get hit by a car? Or is my house going to fall on my head? Who knows? As sure as we can be. And that may be unfair, and it may be knee-jerk, and it may not be truth to their skill set. But I do think for this crop of kids, decisions have been made. And that fills me with a certain confidence, because we've been waiting for this hammer to come. Because you can't.
Why do you
keep
think
dancing,
decisions have been made?
Because Ralph's on his way out, and Ralph was like one of our top prospects.
That's a one-off, though, and I think that's to build off that. That's kind of the way you have to look at each player. It's not like we can say in absolute that the kids are not good enough. You look at DeAndre Kerr.
No, nothing in
DeAndre
absolute.
Kerr, I like
Absolutely.
this about your game, and this is what I see in you going forward. You could be a quality player who potentially goes on to Europe. Potentially, right? And you look at Ralph Priso's game, for example. Okay, Ralph's a good young player, but maybe he wasn't. He's had a really rough year, and you could see the qualities that you like out of him. But okay, maybe we can flip him for a Mark-Anthony Kaye, because that's what Colorado wants. Not necessarily because he's not good enough to be a pro here at Toronto, but rather that's just the way the business is of it. And again, like you can go down the line and look at each player and assess it like that. And sure, maybe some decisions have been made. Maybe someone like a Caden Chung, who we haven't seen play for Toronto FC in weeks, maybe a decision's been made there, being like, okay, you're not quite at the level I was hoping that you were at when you first started off this year. So like little things like that I can say, but in terms of writing off all the kids, I don't think we're anywhere close to that.
Right. And sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I mean, this is probably a fault in how I'm structuring my language, because I agree with you. But how long can you keep dancing around the maypole is my counter, right? Like eventually a decision has to be made about where they fit in this squad, or if they fit in this squad. And I think that can allow for, you're talented, but it's just not working right now, which is essentially what we're saying about the Ralph Priso move, right? There's only a certain amount of spaces, and there's only a certain amount of starters, and there's only a certain amount of responsibilities. So to me, having less worry is a good thing.
I'd also spin it that it's a good thing that they're young, and you can give them time to develop into the players you're hoping they could be. They're young. They can come along in 2 years, 3 years. Like to say every 19-year-old coming through this club has to be a starter at this point in their career
is insanity. It's insanity. Oh, it's absurd. Yeah. Absolutely.
So I think the way that you measure a kid isn't necessarily throwing them to the fire. Can you swim? It's more so, what qualities do you like in that kid? Can you develop? Do you understand the game? Are you willing to learn? There's so many different things that go into a young kid and where they develop. And as people have said with Ralph Priso, sometimes it's not bad for a kid not to get out of here in Toronto. That doesn't mean they're not going to be a player. That doesn't mean so-and-so's writing them off saying they'll never be a player. It's just sometimes a kid does need that change of scenery to get the best out of them. And also,
Mark-Anthony Kaye is a perfect example.
Yeah,
right? Like Mark-Anthony Kaye, the man he was traded for, is a perfect example, right? He was here in Toronto. He probably needs to get out of Toronto and get out of his comfort zone, ends up in Louisville, right? And then finds a ride to LAFC. Like, I think the three of us could safely say when we saw Mark-Anthony Kaye's name on the LAFC sort of expansion roster, we're like double taking, like, really? And yet he becomes an all-star because he finds the right coach at the right time to help him develop to get to where he is. And now he comes back to us a more complete player. And I think that's, and that goes into sort of my last question in this segment, was just in terms of a way forward for youth players at a club where bigger names and experienced players are valued, right? More than maybe playing the young players. Like, what is that way forward? Not even for this generation of young players, but for the next, like the U16, the U17s that are currently in the TFC Academy, thinking, hey, look, all those Kosi Thompson, all those guys, they're getting their chance. When do I get mine, right? What is the way forward for them? Is it to stay and stick it out and see if you get a shot? Or maybe it's like doing something like, an Isaiah Johnston or, other players that have made the trip to CPL and said, hey, I'll start my career here and see where I can get from there. So what do you think that's way forward for those?
That's a major conundrum. Let me just interject that one of the best interviews I ever saw with Mac was when he was really honest about how much he had to grow as a person and how he wasn't really prepared to be a footballer his first stint at TFC, and getting dropped and then ending up in USL and working his way back up to even being a consideration for LAFC was one of the most important moments in his life with respect to his whole safety net was gone. Nobody was coddling him. He had to grow up really, really fast, and he had to do it all by himself. As someone who's experienced some of that in their own life, I can attest that, sometimes it is the big shakeups that where you grow the most. So, and this is not like a goodbye, Ralph, you're going to do well at Colorado because you needed that swift kick in the ass. But, when you talk about in generalities about the TFC Youth Academy, I do see 2 years of this sort of will they or won't they, you're like, you're going to Europe, you're going to train at Liverpool, and then you're back here playing for TFC2 at best 200 minutes a season kind of thing, is not the way, right? Like, it does need to be a bit more streamlined. And like Ravi said, with this delusion that every academy kid is, going to go play for the first team in Manchester United. I think that there is a lack of a center with respect to how the academy operates, what the expectations are, et cetera, because we're not going to do this again, right? We're not going to have another 6 months, re-up, at least in the next little while, where it's like, well, let's just wait for, the replacements to come and you're all going to get starting minutes, over 1,000 starting minutes. That's not happening. That's not how we want to run our club. So where do they fit moving forward, right? Because we won't have this grace period by which to assign roles and figure out, who's what and et cetera, et cetera. I think that's the big question. How are we running our academy?
I would say it's never that linear as you're making that out to be,
sure,
right?
Sure.
It just depends on what kid's coming through and how ready that kid is. It comes down to literally each and every player. In my opinion, it's never a general conversation about the academy. And as you're mentioning, Jeff, yeah, times are going to be changing. So this next period that's coming up here, 2023, is going to be very interesting to see how they decide to use their academy, how they decide to use their second team.
Mm-hmm.
Like going all the way down to their U17 teams and their U15 teams, how they decide to use those. So, yeah, to answer circling back to Mike's question, what's going to be the best option for the next Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy who's coming through TFC, or the next Jaden Nelson who's coming through TFC?
Absolutely.
I don't know. I don't know what's going to be next for them, because I don't know what this club is going to look like in the next year or two, and what opportunities are going to be in front of the next Jaden Nelson, Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy, right?
Can I tell you what I think is? I think minutes are going to be hard to come by, because I think this club is gearing up. This season feels like, and I've said this multiple times, it feels like the 2015 season, right? It feels like the ebb before the big flow of signings that are just going to come in to try to get us back to a championship. And I don't know if there's enough space on the boat for all the young kids, right?
Right.
And some of those young kids may end up again being used as bait to get MLS experienced players in this league,
Yep.
which again is not necessarily a bad thing, I don't
It's
think,
not.
right? Because a lot of those players will always, and I find it more with TFC Academy products, they're always attached to this club in some
Yep.
way,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
When you talk to former players, I've talked to to Daniil Henry, I've talked to Ashton Morgan, you talk to all these players that have been through this club at that level, like a Jordan Hamilton, they're always watching this club. They're always
Yep.
connected to it in some way. And it doesn't mean that they're necessarily going to always come back and play for the club, but this club stays in their heart in some way.
And that's fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
And that means they could come back at some point. They might do a Pog back, right? As he has now done twice. So from that perspective, that window is always there, open to them. And frankly, if a CPL route's better for them to get minutes and get playing and get to a U20 team and go to they're not going to the U20 World Cup. They couldn't beat Haiti, but to get to that level, to then get your name out there, do it. Right. And let TFC continue to bring in senior players. And then one day you might be that senior player that they want to bring back.
Yeah. This last thing on this topic is we always talk about how Ontario, Toronto, GTA is such a pool for Canadian talent, hotbed for Canadian talent. Of course, you're going to have to let go of some. You don't have room for every single up and coming GTA youngster that's going to be coming through the ranks. So there's always going to be that narrative that goes around whenever a player doesn't sign for Toronto FC. But at the end of the day, like it's a difficult decision that these guys are going to have to make it to select which select few are going to be the ones that are going to be lucky enough, fortunate enough to break through to the first team first. And there's going to be some that are going to have to, maybe they take the long way back home if they ever come home at all. So that's just a natural progression of, I think, any soccer club in a big market like Toronto.
I think you're right. Think you're right. And yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
So with that, it's enough kid talk for today's pod. We'll open up the Michael Singh notebook and delve into that. Mike, just before you came onto the pod, I think you were at a little impromptu press conference for Mark-Anthony Kaye and his arrival to Toronto FC. We saw the lovely pictures of him arriving at Pearson yesterday. Hopefully he didn't get his luggage lost or have to stay in long security lines. Hopefully they got the MLSE Express Pass. I don't know if they've got that, but they should have that.
They have.
Any takeaways from the presser, Mike, that you want to share with the listeners?
I think just based on what we were just talking about, one of the questions I asked him is, funny story is I actually grew up playing against Mark-Anthony Kaye. We played against each other a bunch of times, and I have a pretty good idea of where TFC were when I was growing up, which is, I'm the same age actually as Mark-Anthony Kaye. So I asked him, I'm like, when you were growing up here, what was Toronto FC like in comparison to what it is now? And
great question.
It's a different breed, essentially. What he's like, the first thing he pointed out to was how much more opportunity young kids are getting now, as opposed to
that just wrapped the last segment. Great.
Where it was back then, which is bang on, because I think there's been a lot of kids who have come through the ranks who have moved on. You look at Canadian Premier League, and a lot of the kids who are successful now, and even not
all
kids
had
anymore,
cups of coffee.
They all had something to do with, not all, but a majority of them had something to do with TFC. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, that's circling back to our old conversation, that happens. In terms of his presser overall, I mean, you guys have all seen Mark-Anthony Kaye speak, and you all know the type of person that he is. And I just need to echo that once again, is that he, not only is he going to bring quality on the pitch, he's going to bring so much to this locker room and so much to the overall dynamic of what Toronto FC is. He spoke about if he was ever going to come back to a Canadian club, it was always going to be Toronto FC.
Amazing.
Of course. And you talk about the connections that, some players who leave still have to TFC. He's one of those guys. right?
Yeah.
Who always
Unfinished business. Yep.
followed TFC with all of that. And another thing I'll add is that I don't think he really expected to come back at this point in his career. He didn't actually. He did not expect to come back this quickly to Toronto, but it happens, and it's just in line for the 2022 World Cup, which Canada obviously first qualified for, and since 1986, and then obviously 2026 in Toronto. So it's just a perfect timing in that regard for him to come back home. Let's say. So
absolutely.
exciting. That part's exciting. What wasn't so exciting was learning that he picked up a little bit of some hamstring tightness, glute tightness, whatever you want to call it. He chalked it up to sort of just wear and tear over the course of a season. Just to give everyone an update on that, is that he's going to try and run tomorrow and see where he is ahead of Wednesday's match. I would say if he does feature on Wednesday, I would say it'd probably be a short stint off the bench just to play it safe. And then maybe with an eye towards the weekend against Montreal is maybe when we see him make his full TFC debut. But we'll see kind of how that plays out and unfolds. I think there's a lot of moving parts to that. And again, hamstrings, glutes, as you guys know, with this club, you always want to play it safe there. So that part was really cool, getting to talk to him and know him. And you could see the excitement on his face that he had to come back to Toronto, especially at this time.
And it must be said, especially to reunite with Bob Bradley, who managed him, like I said, during possibly the best performances of his career, certainly in Major League Soccer. And considering the difficulty adhering to Bob's preferred system, I mean, this guy's plug and play. He's as plug and play as you could possibly get, which I think we can't understate. You know, we've been struggling in our midfield, and we've just brought in a guy that knows the preferred system cold and excels in it, and that really is unbelievably wonderful. You know, it's almost preferable to Junior Hoylett, who we bandied about quite a bit, and I was whooping and hollering. I mean, I didn't even think Mac was a possibility. So when the rumor came out about this, and then it eventually crossed the line, it's backflip time, man. It's dreamland. This is great. This is great. And I do think you need to mention it.
Jeff, it only came about in recent weeks, something that Bob Riley briefly touched on, and then he said some speculation actually got in the way of the deal, so made it a little bit more difficult for the team to complete it. I'm not sure what that means or how it affected it, but apparently it made it more difficult, which is probably why you didn't hear too much about it, because the team was definitely trying to keep a lid on sort of all of it. So a deal that transpired fairly quickly, and when Mark-Anthony Kaye becomes available at this time of his career, with everything happening in Canadian soccer, I think you got to pull the trigger.
You got to make it.
Yeah, it's a no-brainer. Now, Yvonne is asking something. Mike Singh, please correct me if I'm wrong. Did Mac sign a 4-year contract with Colorado this season?
Prior to the season, he signed an extension through 2025 with a team option for 2026. So
yeah, I think I read that somewhere. Yeah,
perfectly in line with TFC and their sort of vision here. And on that note, he's going to be a key part of the midfield for the next 4 years through the 2026 World Cup, which is in line with Phil Manning's 5-year plan that he has sketched out. And Mark-Anthony Kaye is going to be a significant part of that plan for the foreseeable future. That's why it's such a big addition. Yeah.
It's funny. I was talking to people on Saturday, and a lot of people that were more Canadian soccer people were more excited about Mark-Anthony Kaye than they were about the prospect of Lorenzo Insigne, just simply because of the implications to the midfield that he would be. Not to say that they're not excited about Insigne, of course they are, but just in the sense of it's a Canadian midfielder connecting with Jonathan Osorio, who he knows really well, connecting with Michael Bradley, who he's going to connect with really well in terms of the way and style at which they play. That was, I think, a really exciting for a lot of people to know that was going to be essentially your midfield core going forward for the rest of the season and into next season as well.
I mean, you just up the horsepower of your engine by like another 200, right? Like you're using premium fuel and you turbocharged it, right? So, I mean, what's not to like? Absolutely. And again, you know, there's a lot of there's a lot of what ifs with Insigne, and certainly there's a lot of what ifs with Mac, but this is as much of a plug and play option as was available to this club anywhere in the world. I'd say, like, the player and the coach are perfectly familiar with each other. You know, the other 8 that we're presumably going to be playing with, he plays with on the regular in the Canadian men's national team. It checks out a lot. It checks a lot of boxes.
Let me, I guess, stop you there. How long do you think we're going to see Jonathan Osorio and Mark-Anthony Kaye play together for Toronto FC?
Are you trying to start something or what? Like,
Jonathan Osorio is out of contract at the end of this year.
No, that's true. That's true.
Fair.
Look,
the way that I look at it, could he? Listen, this is just speculation. I've written everything I've written about Jonathan Osorio, about him wanting to keep his options open for as long as he can. I gotta wonder, is this sort of a potential long-term replacement for Jonathan Osorio at a more cost-controlled price, and you still get a lot of the same commercial aspects to it, whereas he is a homegrown Toronto FC player with the World Cup coming around. Could he be the new centerpiece of that push?
From the commercial perspective, I see the connection there. From an on-pitch perspective, I kind of see it, but I also think you lose a bit of that offensive creativity and capability. I mean, look, he scored a fantastic chip goal on Saturday, right? Not to say that Mark-Anthony Kaye does not have that that he could potentially do. He potentially does.
Sure. Different types of midfielders.
Yeah.
Different types of midfielders. Fair. The one thing I'll add to, I guess, give you guys a better idea of my line of thinking. Jonathan Osorio is about to get paid. With every goal that he scores, his asking price is going to increase and increase and increase. This is a team that's not going to have that much salary cap to play with. And Jonathan Osorio at 30 years old, you got to imagine this is going to be his last big contract.
Fair.
This is a guy, I'm assuming, what he's made maybe $3 million, if that, in his entire career. Perhaps maybe a little bit more. I'm assuming he's going to want to set himself up and his family up moving forward. Again, I'm not speaking for him because I don't know if that's what's motivating him at all.
Yeah.
But you have to imagine maybe there is some forward thinking there by TFC, and maybe Osorio, the way he's playing, might be pricing themselves out.
All right, so I'm going to throw this out here, and I'm going to immediately duck for when the bricks and tomatoes get thrown at me for saying it. But with Carlos Salcedo on the way out, seemingly, does TFC consider using that DP spot on Jonathan Osorio and making him essentially a homegrown designated player like some clubs in the league have done with other players?
Would you?
Okay, so here's my line of thinking on it, and it's going to be an unpopular opinion. I would say there is a case to do it. I understand the age of the player, so I understand that one. I understand that with Toronto FC and the type of international players that they could potentially draw in, it's potentially a detriment to give him a designated player contract from that perspective. But if you look at it from a known quantity perspective in terms of on the pitch, I mean, he's been your best player. Let's be real here. He has been your best player. Maybe outside of, and I know a lot of people are going to say Michael Bradley, blah, 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 but the stats say he's actually been probably your best midfielder in terms of ball wins and things like that. But realistically, Jonathan Osorio has been your best player for going on almost 2 years now.
Absolutely.
So that's one. Pretty consistent in terms of his availability. I know he's had some injury issues this year, but pretty consistently available for you as a player. And from that commercial perspective, he is probably, aside from Michael Bradley and now Lorenzo Insigne, your best known local product on the team. So from that perspective, is he worth a designated player contract? I would say there are a lot of players in this league that are on designated player contracts that aren't anywhere
that
close
aren't
to
worth it.
The worth, both commercially and on the pitch, that Jonathan Osorio is. So I would say yes. Would it be a lower end of a DP contract? Probably. But we kind of had this discussion with Dwayne De Rosario back in the day, and we didn't want to give him that money. And then he came back and he burned us like crazy. So let's just that's where I'm coming from my sort of thought process. I know a lot of people are not going to agree with me, and I'm ready to catch that smoke on online, but that's how I'm thinking. And I'll throw it out there, then you guys can tear me to shreds if you want.
Jeff, do you want to?
I mean, I'll start. Would I? Here's my calculus. My calculus is this. You celebrate somebody like Bob Bradley taking the discount so that we can sign another DP to go on a TAM contract. That door has to swing both ways, right? Your team can't just be taking. It also has to give back sometimes. And that might be what we call the Oso conundrum. Does he deserve a bigger payout from the team? Absolutely. His arc points in that direction. Does it again illuminate how kooky the DP rule is and how it kneecaps teams, especially in situations like this? Absolutely. If this was any other team without a DP tag, it would just simply be more of the budget going to a player that earns it. But because he's now at the cusp of the DP tag, there's an entirely different group of stupid principles that are applied to this. So for those two reasons, I would say yes, because the club has to, it can't just be taking, thank you for your service, Bradley. We really appreciate you, going to TAM, but no, Oso, no. We're not going to do it in the other direction. And I think for that reason alone, it's worth considering.
Because he's already on essentially like high TAM money, isn't he?
He's on like a high TAM deal. I think
just
he's
over $1 million.
Yeah, exactly. And so like in another league, where there isn't that cutoff, that line of demarcation where suddenly you've got different expectations. Is he playing like a DP for our club? I would say also yes. I mean, he's the straw that stirs the drink. And then I would agree with you, Mike, the bird in hand is worth two in the bush idiom, right? DPs often don't work out. Getting rid of Oso for, some Pablo Piatti, Bernardeschi, whatever the case may be, is probably short-sighted, and of all the players that, again, it could be, does Jonathan Osorio want to come back? Is it about money, or is it about the fact that he's going to be 30 years old and he wants to test himself somewhere else, and in which case it doesn't matter what we say.
All right, I'm ready for Mike to come after me now. So.
Yeah. You guys are so wrong.
Okay, go, Mike. Here we go, Mike.
Okay. All right. Would you rather Bernardeschi at 28 years old coming over, or would you rather a Jonathan Osorio at 30, 31 years old committing the next couple years to this club?
It depends on the player. It really depends on who you're bringing in. Okay, so Bernardeschi's coming, and it's not going to affect that, right? I'm talking about
I'm just saying, like for an example, that's the quality of players that they're going after, from both on-field standpoint and also the commercial standpoint.
But isn't that doing Oso dirty though?
Really moved the needle commercially that
listen, if we. Yeah, you saw what Criscito's doing out there at 35 years old, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
No, not from a commercial perspective, not a playing perspective.
I think he does do a pretty significant amount just based on the buzz that there is around. Like if you re-sign Osorio to a contract, what's the buzz versus bringing in a new player like a Bernardeschi?
No, a bunch of us are happy and warm inside, but you're right, it doesn't move the needle. My issue is doesn't that do Oso a bit of do him a bit dirty?
It's a cutthroat world. TFC has been cutthroat this season. I love Jonathan Osorio as a player. He's a fantastic human being. He means so much to this club. If he's asking for DP money, I don't think you can do it based on the fact that you're giving up. It's not just you're giving up a DP spot, which may be a player like Bernardeschi, which may be a player like, hey, let's say maybe they decide to go crazy, get an Insigne again. One of those types of players. The way the needle is moving right now in Major League Soccer, where you're seeing the Gareth Bales come in, and you're seeing other
not a DP
year.
Well,
for now,
sort of a half DP
each year as we move on, we see rumors of Luis Suarez coming in. each year as we progress, the level for a DP in Major League Soccer is getting higher and higher and higher.
Agreed.
And I would be concerned about giving so let's say a 3-year DP contract, not necessarily for this season, because as Jeff, you alluded to, he's probably playing around a DP level. I would still argue I think a DP should have higher standards, although Osorio has been absolutely fantastic. But what does that deal look like in 2024 when the players who are on the market and the way the league's moving, instead of bringing in one of those players, you've instead put a DP spot on
I
Jonathan
get what you're
Osorio.
saying. I would
I
counter by saying that the Insigne deal could look like that in 2 to 3 years, right? Like he's coming in at 31, 32.
But think about where Insigne is now compared to Jonathan Osorio.
Right, but you could also see a significant.
And that,
I'm not saying you will. I'm not saying you will, but you could see a significant drop off in those.
I think you guys are really underrating Serie A and Italian.
No,
players.
no,
not at all. Not at all.
No, I understand the skill. Do not get me wrong. I am not questioning that Insigne is probably going to end up being the best player in the league by the time he starts playing. Like that is not what I'm saying.
I'm knocking on wood for all of our benefit.
That's fair. But what I'm saying is that the same risk applied to players if you're going to give them that kind of contract, right? You could see that level drop off, and it could drop off quickly. And it may just be as simple as, look, age catches up to everybody at a certain time, right? And at that point, if that's the concern, the same risk applies to an Insigne than it does to an Osorio.
Criscito,
you know why I hate this? So go ahead.
Criscito's 35 years old. He's not a superstar by any means in Serie A. Wasn't a star with the national team. Was a fringe national team player. Spent most of his career with a lower tier Serie A team. Had a good run in Russia. He's as good, I would argue, if not slightly less important to the team than a Jonathan Osorio. Think about where Lorenzo Insigne will be, even if he drops off a little bit. So that's the drop off I'm talking about when I talk about a DP.
Okay.
Like that's the difference in sort of quality of DPs that I'm sort of alluding to, right?
This is why I hate it. Because you always hear people say, okay, the secret sauce to winning MLS Cups is a team of, elite players sprinkled with MLS veterans, right? That's the secret sauce. Like you ask, every coach, every executive, the overwhelming majority are going to give you some kind of riff on that, right? But there's a ceiling for MLS experience. Oso is now representing that glass ceiling that you can't shoot through. And, as much as I'm excited for Bernardeschi, when you look at his stats with Juve, he hasn't exactly lit the world on fire. So the general consensus is that MLS is so bad that this guy who's not really lighting the world on fire at Juve, and they weren't too upset to see him go, is going to come here and just light it up, right? Which is the bird in the hand, two in the bush idiom, writ large. What is the advantage other than simply not being able to do it anywhere else to a career in MLS that starts in MLS now, when you can see the glass ceiling, when you're in Oso's situation, when you've been a great soldier to the club, when you've ascended to a level that no one expected you to have, but because of some arcane roster rule, you now find yourself in a total catch-22 no-win situation, right? What does that say about our league? It says that we're not a retirement league, but this is as high as you can go if you're a North American player in our not retirement league, because we still want the shiny from Serie A, we still want the Gareth Bales, we still want the Zlatan Ibrahimoviches. So to me, that's why I hate this. I don't disagree with you, and I do think that that calculus, but I think that calculus is horribly flawed, and it has been horribly flawed, and it just outlines why this whole designated player thing, isn't necessarily worth the weight of the paper it's printed on as the league grows, because we keep snapping back to this horrible situation where we're telling really good domestic players they're not the same as the potential of player X or player Y that we're willing to break the bank for, and that's got to play with your head if you're a domestic player in this league.
Yeah, and look,
it's a two-tiered society.
Yeah, for sure. And then just to wrap up the thought, because I didn't mean to turn it into a debate on the merits of designated player rules, but
I'm getting all the flack, by the way. Everybody.
No, that's fair. And I'm sort of getting. I'll get that too, I'm sure. But I was wrapping up by saying this: like Jonathan Osorio and his worth to the club, I think is probably really hard to measure just in terms of what he brings to the community, to the locker room, to sort of everybody in that sense. Is it worth a DP contract? I think we could have this debate forever, right?
Forever and ever.
Right, forever and ever and ever. To me, I think he is the most important player on the team right now, until at least Lorenzo Insigne gets onto the pitch and we see what he does. But I still think in a lot of ways, sort of that heartbeat, that sort of the je ne sais quoi of a team that you have to have in order to make it what it is, really now lies with Jonathan Osorio. I know Michael Bradley, everybody says Michael Bradley is the heartbeat of the team. That I really think for a lot of reasons is actually more Jonathan Osorio than Michael Bradley, but I'll leave my argument there.
Let's revisit this in a month. Let's revisit when we see Bernardeschi and Insigne on the pitch. Let's revisit this conversation.
Fair enough. We'll put a pin on it.
Fair enough. Put a pin on it. Fair enough.
Yeah, we'll revisit that at that. And with that, we're going to close the Michael Singh notebook. Jeff, did we get any burning questions to wrap up the show from?
We did. We got 2. Okay. One is go ahead.
Mike, unless someone's asking about Bernardeschi, let me just interject quickly.
Yeah.
Bernardeschi, what I'm hearing is the deal could be finalized as early as tomorrow, and hopefully by the end of this week, it gets announced that Bernardeschi is a Toronto FC player. We'll see timeline-wise how that plays out, but everything's all good there. And yeah,
so there you go, Jacinda Bundy on Twitter, who keeps asking me, when is this going to happen? Okay,
maybe tomorrow,
maybe Wednesday,
maybe tomorrow. Joe Soccer said, looks like Salcedo to Juarez is done for a year. Did that tweet go out while we were debating DP salaries for Jonathan Osorio or not?
That's been rumored for a while. Okay. I actually haven't been able to put my finger on exactly which club. I was told a little while ago, if Salcedo were to go back to Mexico, it would be with Tigres.
Okay.
He's been doing his infamous countdown, which I think...
Yeah. He's at like 1.025 now. Yeah.
Hints at the fact that there is a little bit of a snag with those negotiations. So perhaps he is looking at Juarez, because I see that rumor a lot going around. So,
cool.
Well, I guess we'll see how that plays out.
All right. So we'll do this one first. My burning question: what is our confidence level with Jesus being the guy in that number 9 role?
Great question.
Good question.
For now, I'm comfortable. Again, I don't always think your number 9 necessarily has to be like the guy, because I think you just signed the guy and he's playing on the left wing. But from a player perspective, I think he does what you need him to do. I think he can hold the ball up really well. I think he connects with players really well. Yes, the goals have dried up a bit, but I mean, he was hitting stuff that, early in the season that probably 9 times out of 10 weren't going to be goals. So he did get off to that kind of start, and I can understand where people are kind of like, well, where did they all go? But I think that gets better with, again, as we've kind of mentioned before, better players around him as they get into the lineup.
I agree. I think, yeah, he's had a bit of a scoring drought, but look who we're about to surround him with on all sides. Let's give the man a chance. Yeah,
that's a great point. I agree. His quality is there. I mean, you see him when he's dropping deeper. He can link up. When you have Insigne that's going to be slotted into the lineup, he's going to be looking to do a lot more of that. He's being asked to do a lot right now. I think the one thing that Bob Bradley wants to get a little bit more out of Jesus is to be a little bit more aggressive without the ball. When you're
I can see that.
Pressing and chasing. And Osorio he told me today that TFC is a team that wants to be a little bit more aggressive now moving forward, and that's why Mark-Anthony Kaye's addition will help so much, because he's a guy who loves to press. Sir. And I would just love to see that little bit more of a bite out of Jesus' game and a little bit more of a nastiness, edginess side to him, because I think that's the one part of his game that's slowly missing. But I'm excited to see him and Insigne link up, because that's one of the reasons they went out and got Jesus, is the way that he drifts to the left, is what
Yep.
Bob Bradley told me. And he likes to drift out to his left. They like the possibility of those two linking up so much. So I am confident that
Amazing.
he's definitely going to help out, especially when he gets service from Bernardeschi and Insigne.
Awesome. Jeff, we got one more there before we wrap
Yep.
up.
This is Chris, and his question is Kosi Thompson really an 8? His best attributes are passing / connecting with the midfielders, as well as turning and driving into midfield. He looks so awkward out wide crossing.
Chris, we talked about this on the Tunnel Club yesterday. He's not a natural right back. Of course, he's going to look a little awkward out there. Whether that is a situation where Bob Bradley is grooming him to learn to become a right back, I'm not sure. Or if the idea is that eventually he becomes more of a midfielder and goes back into his more natural role, we'll see. We don't even know, as we've had this conversation earlier in this podcast, if he's even going to be around, right? He might be used as a trade chip at some point.
He might.
And that's just the reality of it right now. So yes, he's going to look awkward. Of course, he's going to look awkward. I think, as I think Michael and Jeff and I have said, this is the first time he's played the position in his life. So from that perspective, yeah, he's going to look a little janky out there at times, but that's not to say that he hasn't had moments of quality in that position as well.
There's
and
a
if
lot
he's
of...
an 8, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I'm just saying, if he's an 8, then if we're losing Oso and we've already lost Priso, so much the better. We could use having an 8 in the wings.
You don't know
right?
what you started saying.
I don't start that rumor, man.
You started a rumor you didn't mean to start.
So yeah, in terms of Kosi, like I honestly don't even know at this point what his best position is. We've seen him play higher up on the wing. We've seen him play in the middle. We've seen him play now a lot at right back. I would say he's coming along at right back. Don't love his first touch. I think that gets into trouble a little bit at times. His decision making can be a little bit quicker. On the other side, he's very strong, and I think in battles and engaging, like, he does a lot that probably goes unnoticed in terms of being just stable and being able to fight with a lot of the bigger players in MLS. So he does a good job in that aspect. Not a good crosser of the football.
Yeah.
Not a good crosser.
No, that we can agree.
Yeah, putting him on the flanks is mistake. Yikes level mistake. Yep.
Yeah, that's one of the headaches that drives me crazy, because he gets himself in so many good positions because of his willingness and intelligence moving forward. Just the final ball is not where it needs to be, and
a lot of the young players are in that position right now where their final balls are just not that final action in the final third is not quite there yet.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the hardest parts to come by, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's fair.
Absolutely.
That's fair. Chris wants me to answer a question, but I don't know which one it was, so I'm not going to do that.
Okay.
And Axis of Evil says, I can't believe there wasn't any pause talk. And my counter to that is we've talked about pause to death, man. We've talked about it to death. It's clear it wasn't working. I celebrate this move. I really do. This is the anti-Josie, right? This is as brutal can be. And it hurts. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid, but it's pretty clear it wasn't working. And I'm pleased that somebody made the decision to pull the trigger. Because, people complain about the $150K, but that's better than a free transfer, losing him on a free.
Yeah.
You have to understand that Inter Miami they're going to have to negotiate with him if they want to keep him past the end of this season. So this is basically, they paid $150,000 to audition him,
and they still got sanctions. Remember, they still got sanctions
and they got sanctions. And what was I going to say? I mean, great player. Thanks for the memories. That debut was one of the best nights I've ever had at BMO Field. The thing he did, that little spinorama in midfield in the 2019 MLS Cup, was obscene and made us all squeal with delight. But we, like I said, all the time, and all the pause talk, we put our faith in Bob Bradley. Bob Bradley made a decision. I support the decision.
All right, fair enough. Mike, you get the last word on this.
He's going to tear it up in Miami.
Yeah, I
That's
think
what
he
I'll say.
will. I think he's perfectly fit for what they're trying to do in Miami right now, and that's
It's
because we got to play him in a
it-
couple of weeks. Or
I know,
or
but
was it
that
September?
team's a disaster, and
Yeah.
I don't even know if they train properly.
They're in a playoff
so-
spot, and we're not.
Yeah,
so
they're
just
not
keep
they're
in
not
mind.
that bad this year, man.
Yeah, they're actually in a playoff spot,
And
so
they haven't done they've done it with MVPs.
Yeah, exactly right. They're doing it with Gonzalo Higuain
Sure.
sitting on the bench. Basically, they've effectively benched one of the most high profile DPs in the league. So there's that as well.
I think he's gonna tear it up with Miami.
Absolutely.
We'll see.
Chris's question is, what injury does Bernardeschi have right now? I'm gonna guess calf. That's my. I'm gonna guess.
Well,
calf
let's not will that into the universe.
sunburn
will it
from,
in.
from
None of
the,
that.
Yeah, he's got a
media
sunburn.
He's got a
Absolutely, he's got
sunburn
a
right now.
very bad sunburn, Chris. That's
Apparently.
that's his injury. Yeah.
All right, guys. We'll wrap up the show there. Thank you, everybody, for participating, your questions, and bailing me out on 3 burning questions and not tweeting that out during the week. So I appreciate you guys jumping in. As always, we will be back with Tunnel Club on Thursday night. Oh, no, sorry, Wednesday night, because it is an away game. So we will have that about half an hour after final full-time whistle with myself and Sean. And then, of course, we will be back next Monday with Toronto Till I Die, hopefully with 6 points in the bag and a derby win.
From your mouth
Montreal.
to the soccer god's ears.
Let's
do
hope.
it.
Maybe I might. Right now, I'm not going to Montreal. By Friday, that might have changed. Then
well, Via might be on strike, so you may be driving. Or
exactly. I might be in the back of somebody's flatbed or something like that.
Exactly. All right, boys, another great one.
Absolutely. So for Michael Singh, for Jeffrey V. Nesker, I'm Mike Newell. Thanks for listening to another episode of Toronto Till I Die. We'll see you next week. Take care, everybody.
Cheers, guys.
And wait. And baby, I'm TFC till I die.